The Republic of Kazakhstan is an independent country in Central Asia, a land of opportunities and promise, a source of ideas and development. To make a country like this, it takes endurance, years of climbing up a hard path of development, and crushable spirit, the spirit of justness. It has become one of the key guidelines in building of the young nation, and a guarantee of its completeness and prosperity. Justness in state management was one of the concepts put forth by President Nursultan Nazarbayev. Today I am offering you to choose Kazakhstan built on democratic principles. Today I am offering you to choose new structures, new order based on efficiency and justness of state management. Kazakhstan was faced with a range of serious challenges in the first years of its independence. The period between 1993 and 2000 was the time of creation and strengthening of democratic institutions and forming of new political culture. Guided by the constitution adopted through a referendum in 1995, Kazakhstan started along its way of political and economic transformations. Reforming the legal framework and creating the national legislation were among its top priorities. To succeed in this task, the country needed lawyers whose mission was to determine and establish justice. It is extremely important for every lawyer to understand his or her mission in the life of the society and a huge responsibility to the country. Professional activities of a lawyer mostly consist in making a legal evaluation of facts of a case and paving a way to a competent decision in the form of a legal act. It didn't take long to develop an action plan for creation of the national legislation. The Ministry of Justice enthusiastically got down to work. Over the period from 1993 to 1995, the Civil Code, around 100 regulatory legal acts, and Kazakhstan's fundamental law, its constitution, were adopted. Back then, these reforms implemented by the Ministry of Justice were very modern and advanced. Why are we being so ceremonious and stiff? Why should we restrain ourselves? We should be more natural, not in name, but in truth. After gaining independence, Kazakhstan had to develop theory and practice in all areas of Justice Ministry's activities virtually from scratch. Transition from planned economy to free market economy affected relations in the realm of intellectual property. Evolution of the national system of intellectual property rights protection started in 1992. In 1996, a whole legal base governing industrial property rights was in place. There was an interesting period that I witnessed when I just came to this position, when a lot of presidential decrees that had the force of laws were passed. We solved a lot of problems back then, legislative problems, I mean. And we adopted a lot of very essential, timely and proper regulations through those presidential decrees. To improve efficiency of court enforcement procedures, a law on court enforcement procedures and status of judicial enforcement officers that laid out legal and administrative basis for court enforcement actions was adopted. Enforcement of court decisions is a decisive stage of administration of justice, and over the years of independence, the system of court enforcement went through several transformations. A committee for enforcement of court decisions was established with departments in 4 regions of Kazakhstan to ensure efficiency of court enforcement. Besides enforcement of court decisions, they also managed court enforcement officers. A new department for investigation of certain categories of crimes against justice was formed in 1998.
Да, я имел честь руководить Министерством юстиции 3 года. Это был 97 год.
Yes, I had the honor of leading the Ministry of Justice for 3 years. It was the year 1997. The first task that the President of Kazakhstan gave me was to move the whole Ministry of Justice from Almaty to Astana. But back then the city was not yet called Astana, its name was Akmola. That was the first task that I got as the head of the ministry. The word was full of relocations.
В 97 году Был построен только один кабинет.
Back in 1997, only the Justice Minister's office and its outer office was completed. All the rest of the building was under construction. But in a very short time, the Ministry of Justice managed to move Astana in Korpor. To make this possible, offices had to be constructed. The ministry's headquarters had to be erected. All this was accomplished. Then people had to be accommodated. We were of the first ministries to build several residential apartment houses for our employees. By doing so, we provided our people with housing, and then the work of the Ministry of Justice started. This is how I remember those years. There was a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of meetings and acquaintances, a lot of interesting work. Relationships between ministries were formed anew. New patterns of interaction with the parliament were established. Minister of Justice and his deputies had to personally report on every new law. This had never happened before. For the first time, procedures of development of laws became pre-scheduled. Action plans were made and approved every year. Preparation procedures were developed and draft laws started to undergo expert examination. For the first time, we started registering with the Ministry of Justice all legal acts related to rights and freedoms of our citizens.
План законопроектной работы такой появился, тоже мы стали утверждать на каждый год план законопроектной.
This system, as we know it, is based on the work done by our predecessors. And today I would like to thank and congratulate them, wish them excellent health, and once again say that they have not been forgotten, that they are highly appreciated, and therefore that their rich experience is in demand in the justice system. I congratulate you all, wish you health, well-being and success in your work for the good of our country, the Republic of Kazakhstan.
Поблагодарить и их поздравить, пожелать им крепкого здоровья, сказать, что они не забыты, что они востребованы, что их богатейший опыт, я думаю, безусловно, нужен для системы юстиции. Поздравляю всех, желаю всем крепкого здоровья, благополучия, успехов в вашей работе на благо нашей Родины, Республики Казахстан.
Beginning of the 2000s, 5 years passed since adoption of the Constitution, and the nation continues along the way of modernization of the legislation. The new millennium opens new horizons for the Ministry of Justice. It is preparing to take a central place in the national administration. Unlike other ministries, the Ministry of Justice becomes immune to any kind of political influences and starts to directly depend on the Constitution and the rule of law and acts as their upholder and defender.
Министерству юстиции придавались новые полномочия, в частности, правда, это немножко раньше было, но тем не менее.
The ministry has obtained new powers. It has been made responsible for enforcement of court decisions in particular. The institution of justice was partly becoming a law enforcement body, because investigation into cases of non-compliance with court orders and contempt of court were under the jurisdiction of justice bodies. The Ministry of Justice was getting ready to admit the country's penal system into its ranks as well. In other words, there was a lot on its hands, and it was an interesting work. A lot of work was done during the time when I headed the Ministry of Justice. It was reflected in a range of laws that were later adopted by the government. For example, take this seemingly insignificant innovation that went largely unnoticed.
Проделана была большая работа, и это было заложено в проекты соответствующих законов, они были приняты позже.
Justice bodies became eligible to apply to court on behalf of general public and to question legitimacy of regulatory legal acts. This had never happened before. Now no one remembers about that. It is taken for granted, but back then it was a revolutionary move. In other words, the justice bodies were vested with a function similar to those of prosecution authorities. And what concerns the date? When I am asked why this holiday has appeared only this year, I find it more appropriate to wonder why we haven't been celebrating it before, rather than answer what we are celebrating here.
Выполняли примерно те же функции, как и органы прокуратуры. Знаете, вот по этому поводу мне говорят, ну как же, вот только в этом году. Я думаю, что в этом случае нам надо отвечать таким образом. Лучше отвечать на вопрос, почему вы до сих пор не праздновали, чем на вопрос, чего вы празднуете, собственно говоря.
Within a little over 5 years after the adoption of the constitution, Kazakhstan formulated practically all the aspects of the state and law and harmonized them with the constitution. It formed its domestic and foreign policies and established public institutions of all branches of the government. Integration into the global society opened new directions of development for the country and challenged it with new standards that it had to achieve. Creation of supplementary bodies and agencies was underway, and all the regulatory and legal relationships between those bodies were formulated within the wall of the Justice Ministry and then passed on to the relevant ministries.
В тот момент закладывались уже принципы государственно-частного партнерства. Не только по линии государственной реорганизации шли.
Foundations of public-private partnership were laid at that time. The Ministry of Justice was not only reorganizing things but also developing market mechanisms. This involved passing advocacy and notary institutions into the competitive environment. Thanks to that move, court enforcement institutions are being transferred into the market environment now. Following in the steps of the Ministry of Justice, other public authorities are also transferring to the free market some of their functions that they used to supervise and control. What concerns the private detective activities, I believe that it is the right thing to do. In other words, that period was the finalization of the making of the legal platform of sovereign Kazakhstan. Taking the opportunity, I would like to congratulate all the justice officials on their professional holiday and wish them health, well-being, and success.
Пользуясь случаем, хотел бы поздравить всех работников юстиции с профессиональным праздником и пожелать всем здоровья, благополучия и успехов.
Thanks to the new knowledge and accumulated experience, the work on perfection of the justice institutions started to gain some experimental features. Besides its traditional tasks and goals, the ministry was also made responsible for a whole range of issues related to the penal system. Its jurisdiction stretched as far as prison camps and pre-trial detention centers. However, time showed that this field of operations was more suitable for the Ministry of Internal Affairs, under the jurisdiction of which it was later transferred. The Ministry of Justice continued its development through establishing regional offices all over the country.
В период моей работы ряд мер по организационных вопросов. Именно в тот период.
During the period of my work, a number of steps was taken to reorganize our operations in the region. Departments of the Ministry of Justice were established in Almaty and Astana cities, and branch officers were set up in the regions. These were serious transformations that strengthened the role and authority of justice bodies. It is very good that there is such a professional holiday because thousands of people work in justice bodies. Thousands of citizens turn to them for legal services. Justice bodies are the most visited public bodies. In 1 year, millions of people apply for registration of property, registration of marriage, notarization, and legal aid. The range of services is very broad, and a lot of people are working to provide them. It is with great satisfaction that I remember those years that I spent working as the Minister of Justice. And on this day, that is a celebration for us all. I would like to wish you success and fulfillment of the grand task vested on the justice bodies. I wish you health, happiness, and well-being. The year 2005, Kazakhstan is on the march. It is developing healthcare and education at full pace and dealing with the goals set by the President in his Kazakhstan 2030 strategy. The Ministry of Justice is creating nationwide databases of individuals and legal entities. For the first time in history, it is scrupulously forming a real estate database, gathering pieces of information from all parts of the country. E-government is introduced in 2006. It provides electronic certificates, verifications, and information sheets for the citizens. A thorough work to reorganize public service centers is being done.
Очень интересная работа была по организации центров обслуживания населения по принципу одного окна. Работа очень интересная, очень сложная, очень сложная.
Very interesting work was done to rearrange public service centers along the one contact principle. The work was very interesting and very difficult. Why? Because it is one of the barriers to corruption. This principle was introduced in the centers to make sure that an applicant who comes for a service has no direct contact with officials. The work is being successfully continued now, but at first it was very hard. There was very much antagonism. However, the Justice Ministry managed to succeed. I've gained a colossal experience and learned a lot in the Ministry of Justice. And it was a pleasure for me to work with young professionals and everyone at the Ministry. I'm satisfied with the work in the Ministry of Justice, and I've learned a lot from them, and I hope that I have taught them a lot myself. I'm glad that there is a professional holiday for justice officials, and I would like to wish all the officials a lot of happiness and professional achievements. Justice is all about justness. So I wish that we always find enough courage, determination, knowledge, and professionalism to take just decisions, and to prepare high-quality laws and regulations.
Ведь если брать вообще доподлинно значение юстиции, это справедливость. И поэтому, чтобы всегда хватало смелости, силы, решимости, знаний, профессионализма для принятия справедливых решений.
In 2010, the Supreme Court's Committee for Court Administration was eliminated, and its functions were transferred to the Ministry of Justice by a presidential decree. A Committee for Enforcement of Court Decisions was created in the ministry. To further improve enforcement efficiency, private court enforcers were introduced in April 2010. To improve the national system of protection of human rights, the ministry focused on bringing the judicial system in compliance with the international standards. Since then, that ministry's priorities have been an expansion of relations with international institutions, development of human resources, and improvement of its infrastructure and equipment. To strengthen cross-confessional accord, the Ministry of Justice has expanded its list of administrative, legal, and informational measures called to harmonize the religious situation in the country and prevent manifestations of religious extremism. Amid the progress in information technologies and creation of e-government, the President of Kazakhstan emphasized the importance of improving the population's educational level.
Мы сегодня акцентируем особое внимание на развитии механизмов обратной связи.
Today we are giving special attention to the establishment of feedback mechanisms in public bodies for our citizens through the use of information technologies. There are around 8 million internet users in Kazakhstan now, which is a half of all Kazakhstan citizens. This makes development of e-government and tri-level systems of e-Akimat especially important. The government is developing a program called Informational Kazakhstan. Starting from 2013, all the permitry and licensing procedures will be transferred into e-format. This is very important. The key principle of fighting corruption is to make sure that officials do not have any personal contact with applicants. A successful society in the 21st century is a society of people who know their laws. And the fundamental part of knowing the laws is knowing the Constitution. Nurturing the population's legal culture is an important aspect of social modernization. It should start in kindergartens and schools, continue in colleges and universities, and then in every company. This is a task for every public body, national company, and employer.
Задача всех государственных органов, национальных компаний, работодателей всех форм собственности.
For many years, the Ministry of Justice has been actively involved in contributing into the establishment and strengthening of the nation. Over these years, the ministry and its departments have been fundamentally transformed and found their true place in the system of state management. Through its multifaceted activities, the ministry is successfully implementing legal policies of sovereign Kazakhstan. But life forges ahead, so there is much more interesting and useful work to be done.
Коллектив трудоспособный, высокопрофессиональный. Я думаю, что действительно
The team is able and highly professional. Now, at the new stage of development of the country, there are many socio-economic issues to be solved and laws to be adopted. I will do everything possible to uphold the reputation that the Ministry of Justice has been maintaining during 20 years of independence.
Марку, которая уже на протяжении всех 20 лет независимости Министерства юстиции показывает, поднять на еще высший планку.